Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. And I want to say thank you very much to Senator Klobuchar for joining us this afternoon, to the Athena Coalition and our co-host Small Business Rising for pulling us all together this afternoon. My name is Lauren Jacobs, and I am the Executive Director of the Partnership for Working Families. We are a national network of regional organizing organizations who support innovative solutions to our nation's economic and environmental problems, and we are a very proud member of the Athena Coalition. We've been building a movement to ensure our democratic institutions act to protect working people, immigrants, people of color, businesses, consumers, and democracy itself from Amazon's unprecedented monopoly power. We believe that in order to protect all Americans from predatory, exploitative, and extractive actions by the largest corporations, we must take on the power of these monopolies, including breaking them up and regulating them. And we must center racial justice while we do this. Outsized corporate power not only distorts our economy, but manipulates our democracy. Congressional action is necessary to undo decades of misguided policy choices. Senator Amy Klobuchar will start today's town hall with some remarks about this crucial moment. Then we'll hear from frontline community members who will share how they're impacted by Amazon's unrestrained monopoly power. And then we'll get to listen to a conversation between these folks and Senator Klobuchar. The second half of our town hall will be breakouts so that grassroots organizers, policy advocates, workers, and independent business owners can share how we're taking on corporate power in our communities and strategize what could be our next steps together. You'll have an opportunity to self-select into a breakout group. So don't worry, you'll get to pick where you go. And first, please join me in welcoming Senator Amy Klobuchar. The senator is the chairwoman of the Senate Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Competition Policy, Antitrust and Consumer Rights, which is tasked with oversight of antitrust enforcement at the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. She is also the chairwoman of the Senate Democratic Steering and Outreach Committee and chairwoman of the Rules Committee, which oversees the rules and operations of the Senate. Senator Klobuchar also sits on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, and the Joint Economic Committee. She just published a book, Antitrust, Taking on Monopoly Power from the Gilded Age to the Digital Age, which was just released this April. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and we're so happy you're here with us. I turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you for that kind introduction. Thank you to Athena for all you do in every way to help working families. And I also thank you on taking on the really tough issue of monopolies. You know, it doesn't really just come off your tongue, antitrust or monopolies. And I really appreciate you taking it on, because it's the only way we're going to get to where we need to be as a country. And you look at it, I just always step back, I think about how can you talk about it in a way that's really straightforward to people. And that is that small businesses, individual consumers are really suffering the brunt of the economic crisis caused by the pandemic already. And then you ask yourself, why is healthcare so expensive? Why are the prices for common drugs like insulin more than 10 times the price in Canada? Why are cable rates so high? And the answer is actually really simple. Where there's monopolies, there's a lack of competition. We see it in online travel, and you go on there, you think, oh, I can get a deal. Well, actually 90% of those companies, they're all owned by hotel bookings, owned by just two companies, Expedia and Booking, but they have different brand names. So you're thinking you're getting different deals, but you're not. We see it in our economy with major companies like Amazon, which is both a monopoly, arguably, and a monopsony, because so many of the people that sell things to Amazon don't sell to anyone else. And that is a definition of a monopsony. And you see it in everything from cat food to caskets. John Oliver actually did a half hour of a show on this, and he showed all the consolidation in our economy. And then at the very end, he said, if this is enough to make you want to die, good luck, because there's only 3 casket makers left in America. And actually now one has bought the other. So there's actually only 2. And so that's what we're dealing with right now in the American economy. And I think you're starting to see more and more interest in this because Americans understand this idea that there's too much consolidation and that concentrated markets have negative impacts on consumers, workers, and of course, disproportionately, and I appreciated you taking this on at the beginning, on the minority community and small businesses in the minority community. So this is all about cracking down on unfettered growth, abuse of market power. You wonder why it's so hard to do. Well, monopolies also lobby really a lot. They have a lot of money. And so that's why groups like Athena bringing out these issues is so important. There's an old cartoon of in the old days when the states, instead of the voters, picked the senators, and it shows all these big bloated monopolies at the time, the steel trust, the rail trust, looking down on the Senate because they controlled everything in the Senate. Well, now the voters vote. But if big money controls everything, and if you're unable to pass things like we have in the past, actually, we've updated our monopoly laws when there's changes in the economy, and that just doesn't happen right now. You look at Australia, for instance. I love this story because it just shows what monopolies do. So Facebook and Google, Australia says, you know what? We want to start making you pay for the news content, just like we think they should do here because of the fact that you've got newspapers that are closing down and the like. So we think you should pay for it. Literally, Facebook says, well, we're going to switch off our news on our platforms. They actually did that. That's where they're just like, we're going to take our marbles and go up and we're going to leave a big industrialized nation. Well, they did that. And then there was so much international pressure, they reversed course. Google responded by threatening to pull Google search out of the country. They control 90% of the search engine in the country, essentially holding it hostage. But again, the international pressure changed that. So I think if people just believe this when they say, just trust us, then if you believe that, then why do we have this toxic disinformation out there about the vaccines or about what happened on January 6th leading up to it? You know, why do we have no privacy rules, things like that? You go back to monopoly power. So what do we do to take on the monopolies today? Well, we start by rebooting the antitrust movement in the US with events like you're doing today. You then go to bills themselves. And I did get Senator Grassley to do a bill with me on upping the funding for the agencies that deal with antitrust. That's the FTC and then the Antitrust Division of the Justice Department. And so our Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, I know that's just a really exciting name of a bill, but what it does is it says, you know what, we can't use duct tape and Band-Aids anymore to take on the biggest companies of the world like Amazon. We can't do that. So it puts in over $100 million to the agencies to hire lawyers and the like to at least be able to follow through on some of the cases that have recently been brought to get the job done. We actually got that through the Judiciary Committee 2 weeks ago, and it's going to get done. I'm about 98% sure this week on the Senate floor. So I'm pretty excited. That's the good first step. We know how high the stakes are. And all you have to do is look at Mark Zuckerberg's email that was discovered in the House hearings that my friend David Cicilline held, where they discovered this email where he said, we'd rather buy than compete. That's what he said. I don't think you need to know more than that, because if you buy all the small competitors up, like WhatsApp and Instagram, then you lose that competitive force. And we know the stakes are high. We know the facts are stark. And if we don't act now, the curse of bigness that Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis once warned about will continue to threaten American innovation. As another Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall, once said of our antitrust laws, they are as important to the preservation of economic freedom and our free enterprise system as the Bill of Rights is to the protection of our fundamental personal freedoms. We cannot and we must not forget that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you and hearing your question. So thank you very much. And I wanted to keep enough time so I could hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. We're going to next hear from some members of our community here who will talk about the everyday ways that workers and independent businesses are impacted by monopolies like Amazon, and how we can address concentrated corporate power through policy. First, we'll hear from Angela Schweisnedel. So Angela, would you like to come forward and ask your question?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for this meeting and for your leadership on this issue. My name is Angela Schweisnedel, and I own Moon Palace Books in South Minneapolis. We've been in business 8 years, and for the health of our community and staff, we shut down in March of 2020 and are still in the process of reopening for in-person shopping. Our staff went from around 40 people to 8, and our revenues dropped. The really hard thing with the pandemic is that as a small business, we were thinking of our community first. Amazon's market dominance and predatory practices were squeezing independent bookstores like mine out of existence even before COVID. And at the beginning, Amazon entered and dominated every aspect of the book industry. But they didn't stop there. Now they've gone beyond books, beyond online shopping. They're no longer just a company that buys and sells things. They're no longer just a platform to sell products. They do everything. It's almost impossible not to use them. With all their ability to track and collect data, Amazon has every bit of info about a person's buying habits. What does that mean for my ability to do business with that customer? And this year, when we've all lost so much, how can we justify Amazon coming out so far ahead? My business tried to make decisions to keep people safe, but Amazon had the power to dominate the digital marketplace without having to care or take responsibility if people got sick or not. Amazon had the name and the power to take all orders. It's dangerous when one company has that much power. Can you share what you're planning to do to dismantle Amazon's power so that businesses like mine have a shot, and whether you support breaking up some of the big tech companies?
Okay, well, thank you, Angela, and I love your business, and I know how much you have worked to keep your employees and to do everything that's right for them. And I think your story is a story we're seeing all over the country. You know, it's one thing for a company to be big, but it's another thing for a big company to use its power to prevent its rivals from competing. And one of the things that we're seeing is that you've got these companies that become not just monopolies because no one can really compete with them because no one's been enforcing the antitrust laws, but also monopolies, which I mentioned, where you've got 20% of Amazon sellers only sell through Amazon. And the first thing I'd say is we need to update our antitrust laws. And so it will help in everything from book publishing to retail to big tech to ag to pharmaceuticals. And I just believe that if you just keep going the way we are and you think you're going to wait for the conservative courts for Neil Gorsuch to suddenly have an epiphany and a change of mind, that's not going to happen. So I believe in adding to the agencies because then they're going to be able to bring more cases. That's really important because it can literally stop bad things from happening if they start being more aggressive. I'm glad you probably maybe heard of a woman named Lena Khan who wrote a very famous article on looking at our antitrust laws in a different way vis-a-vis Amazon and the other tech companies. I was pleased to actually introduce her at the FTC as the newest nominee for commissioner at the Senate hearing, and she did really, really well, and she's going to be on the FTC. That's going to be a game changer, by the way. So that's all about enforcement and having the agency strong. And there's another guy named Tim Wu that the president has put in place who really think out of the box. So we need, it's not just can you pass a bill, it's who is enforcing the laws. Then when it comes to the legislation, I think that if a monopoly acts to exclude a competitor just from the fact that they're so big and what they're doing, they should have the burden of proving that their conduct doesn't harm competition. And that would be a game changer to change that standard as opposed to making the government prove it. And you should be able to not just do it going forward for mergers, but that wouldn't really fix your situation. You have to also be able to look back at conduct. There's a great example of breakups. You asked about breakups, and yes, that has to be part of this divesting assets. I once represented MCI in Minnesota, and I had just the front row seat to see what it was like to take on a big monopoly. They were then competing, right, against AT&T, and they were trying to get in the marketplace. And what we saw is that the AT&T breakup, which a lot of people predicted, oh, we can't do this. Well, what happened was we got lower long distance rates, and we got a whole new cell phone business that was much better than it used to be when the cell phones were these huge things, because we got competition. And that's what's lacking right now when you have tech companies that are gatekeepers. Amazon when it comes to retail online, Apple when it comes to the phones, or Facebook when it comes to the platforms, or Google when it comes to search engines. And so that's why I think it's really important to both get strong people in these agencies, give them the resources they need, and then make the laws better. Because if you just leave it to the courts right now, they have gotten increasingly conservative in their antitrust rulings, and it makes it really, really hard. And the last quote I'll end with here is something that actually another Mark Zuckerberg quote from an email. He was talking about some of the businesses that they were looking at, small ones. And he said, these businesses are nascent, but the networks are established. And he says, the brands are already meaningful. And if they grow to a large scale, they could be very disruptive to us. Well, that's what tech is supposed to be. It's supposed to be disruptive. Competition is supposed to be disruptive. Your bookstore, with your new ideas and getting out there, it's supposed to be an alternative to the big guys and a place you can go where you can get your local books. We want that disruption in a really good way in the market. And that's why, yes, Breakup has to be on the table when it comes to these companies. Otherwise, unless you force some divestiture of assets, they're going to just keep going the way they are.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for that answer. And I want to ask Mohammed Suleiman and his interpreter, Saba Youssef, who both have Mohammed has a question for you, and Saba will be interpreting for him.
سؤاشي waxa weeyaan dawladdu maxay ka qabtaa xadgudubka lagu hayo shaqaalaha shirkadaha oo waliba aad la ogaanayo hadda muxuu ahaa shaqaalahani ay u badan yihiin garanaysa kulligood immigrant aan luqad ku hadlayn ingiriisiga thaqaafad baqadin ama waxankaas ku jirto xuquuqdooda aanan garanayn xadgudub badan matalan ku dhacdo hadda muxuu ahaa shaqaalaha.
Saba, are you on the line?
Hi, I am. Sorry. What are some of the unfair, my name is Mohammed. My question to you is, what are some of the unfair law practices that the anti-monopoly policies could go after? What are some of those unfair law practices that they could go after? And the reason why I'm asking the question is because there's a lot of workers who have a lot of fear in regards to being able to come forward and bring about some of their complaints and not knowing what their rights are because they are either have language barriers or they're new to the country.
Sure. Well, turning away a little from antitrust first is stronger labor laws, right? There's something called the PRO Act, making it easier for workers to organize would be the first answer. The second thing is actually looking at the antitrust laws in a different way. I think people always think of them, okay, if you've got things that are too big, it means they can raise prices, which they do sometimes, right? Sometimes they keep them really low, and then they eventually have the power to raise prices. Or you think it's about small businesses, which of course it is when you heard from Angela. But excessive concentration actually also hurts workers. because you don't have choices of who you work for, and they're able to set these wages too low. When you look back in the history of the antitrust laws, they actually came up at the same time as the labor movement did, because of the fact that workers were taking on the monopolies of their time. And so what it does is it gives monopolies, give big employers more power over employees, leading to lower wages, harder to organize, and also it raises incentives for unfair labor practices, like refusing to participate in good faith collective bargaining. And research has shown actually that when labor market concentration, the bigness goes up, wages go down. So I think antitrust enforcers have to look at labor markets as well when they look at mergers or they look at a status of an industry, because the research has shown over and over again that the negative effects of labor market concentration on wages are lower in the certain industries. And I just, I come from a union family. My grandpa was a miner and a union member, and he went to work as a Teamster when he was really young at age 15. He had 9 brothers and sisters, and then he went and worked in the mines. And it was because of the unions that the wages finally went up and the mines became safer. My mom was in the teachers union as well. And I wouldn't be here right now talking to you guys about antitrust if it wasn't for labor and if it wasn't for unions. And to make it all work, you need open and fair labor markets and legal reform. And part of what the bill that I have, this sweeping legislation, and there's a number of senators who've co-sponsored it with me, makes it easier to crack down on mergers and makes it easier to look back when an industry is already consolidated and finally do something about it. Because I think so much attention is paid on economic issues that are really important, and many of you have taken on so many of them, including immigration reform and minimum wage and the like, but a lot of times antitrust gets left behind, yet that's where all of this stuff goes on, where they find ways to get around things and create situations where it's really hard for workers to be on an even playing field. And so you just got to put the trust back in antitrust, which means to me taking this on for the people of this country.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you here today and interacting with I think I will call us a community today,
Yeah.
all of us gathered here together. And
Yes.
I want to thank Angela and Mohammed for sharing their perspective and their questions. And I think it's one of the ways that we can see how sometimes something like antitrust, anti-monopoly can seem very sort of heady and not close to the everyday, and see how for a business leader in Minneapolis, a Amazon worker in Minneapolis who is a member of the Wood Center, how it is affecting them in their day-to-day life, and thus how this is an issue for all members of our community to be concerned about.
Exactly. And I had heard Angela's voice. I see Mohammed, but I just see her in front of all those books, reminding us of what this is really about and people's businesses. So I want to thank both of them and you, Lauren, and the entire group. And I look forward to being back again. And I just hope people see that there has been a sea change here. There is something is going on. It's not just academic talk anymore. When you look at some of those people, as I mentioned, like Lena Khan, who's working on these issues and is going to be in a position of power, or where you look at the fact that we're able to get this money through in the middle of the year in judiciary just to be able to take on these cases. And so we need to seize this moment and move ahead and not be beaten down by what are some really big interest lobbying efforts right now. And I'm up for it.
Well, we sincerely thank you for being such a champion of our communities, and we look forward to being in this dialogue as the weeks and months move forward as this work advances. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everybody.
So as I promised, as we started, we're going to soon break up into discussion groups, and you will have a way to pick which one you want to go to. But before we do that, I wanted us to hear from 2 more folks from our community here. First, I would like to ask Derek Peoples of Amoeba to join us. And Derek will explain some of the ways that he is and his partners in his organization are taking on the cause of anti-monopoly in the day-to-day. Derek?
Thank you. And again, my name is Derek Peebles. I'm the executive director of the American Independent Business Alliance, also known as Amoeba. And for the last 20 years, we've been a part of a nationwide movement to support locally owned independent businesses and address the competitive disadvantages that independent businesses often experience due to policies and economic structures. So we often hear from the leaders of the 100 plus independent business organizations in our alliance and in our networks, who then hear directly from business owners from cities and rural regions, large and small, nationwide. And what they're telling us is that it's harder than ever to start and grow a business, no matter how great your idea or how hard you work. So Amoeba is a founding member of Small Business Rising, and we believe that breaking the power of monopolies is key to safeguarding the right of independent businesses to compete and serve the needs of their communities. And so Amoeba views many of anti-monopoly policy reforms discussed today are key to ensuring resilient and growing local economies. We also believe that hearing the stories from business owners and people in our community makes concrete why we need common good approaches to take on monopoly power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek. And next, I want to call forward to the screen Jeremy Greer, co-executive director of Liberation and a Generation, who is also taking on the issue of anti-monopoly with a strong racial justice lens. Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren, and thanks all for joining in on this fight. So my organization, Liberation in a Generation, we're an organization that works with grassroots leaders to transform the economy so that it actually works for people of color. We hope to do what we call dismantle our current oppression economy and move towards building a liberation economy that centers the needs of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, and all people of color. And as it relates to this issue, we recently wrote a report recently where we really dived into what is this connection between anti-monopoly, between monopoly power and racial inequality. And of course, I don't think I need to go through it with the folks in this call, because I think what is clear is that, and what we've seen through this pandemic, as you know, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and the monopolists that have grown their wealth so much during this pandemic, is that it is people of color who are carrying the weight of this economic recovery through their essential work that they provide to these same firms, to these same monopolies. And what really came out in this report, and the folks that we talked to in building this report, that is, if we're going to have a true kind of robust response to this monopoly power, we really have to lead with racial justice, and we have to lead with the experiences of people of color who are working and being harmed by these monopolies, and that the grassroots organizers that are working with those folks are the ones that should also be leading not just the energy to move policy forward, but actually the development and crafting of policy that is going to have ultimately the impact that we want to see in the world. But as it relates to Amazon, what we know is that, you know, we heard the senator say, like, these things are really technical and these things are really, you know, and Lauren references as well. But actually, you know, I believe, and I think that we believe, like, it isn't that technical, right? What's right is not hard. It's not difficult. It's not complicated. We know what's right. And these leaders know what's right. You know, Amazon, yes, it's a tech firm, but it's also a grocer. It's also a retailer. it's a warehouser, it's a delivery service, it's all of these things. And we've dealt with corporations that do all those things before. So we shouldn't deal with Amazon any differently. In the end, it is a corporation that has shareholders, that has workers. And we know how to deal with corporate power. And we've done it for decades as grassroots organizers. We should apply those same tactics to deal with Amazon. So I think the message that we want to say is that I want to leave with you is that you have the tools for this fight, and you don't need to look much further than what's here on this call and in this community.
So I want to thank Jeremy and Derek for those provocations before we head into our breakout group, and to sort of really underline the points from the first conversation with Senator Klobuchar and to these provocations that we are trying and working as organizers, as advocates, as small business leaders to sort of make concrete how anti-monopoly and how antitrust is real for all of us. That Angela is a business in our community. For the folks that live around Moon Palace and go there to sit amongst the stacks and read books, she's not only a business owner, she is part of the community fabric of that community. And I actually remember Moon Palace playing an incredible role during the uprising last summer and in many of its statements as well. And as well, thinking about what Mohammed's bringing forward, our neighbors, people that with whom we are riding public transit, the folks that live across the street from us, the people with whom our kids are going to school, are being impacted by Amazon and companies like this in terms of the labor practices that they are making, driving not only in their own shops, but then transforming the conditions across the industry. So I just wanted to bring that down to us. And I think Jeremy was making that point. It is both all of our day-to-day experience we have with what the effects of anti-monopoly are, and also that's right, the solutions rest within us. So what's going to happen now? There will be two groups. There'll be one for folks that are identified primarily as small business owners and want to talk with others about how small business owners can be organized and working together to advocate for policy shifts, as well as there will be a second group that will include folks that identify as organizers or community advocates. Barry and Theo will be facilitating the group with small business owners, and Sasha will be facilitating the group with organizers and advocates. So what will come up is a choice in the little, where you look at the bottom of your screen where it says breakout rooms, that little square. If you click there, there should be two options. You will pick the one you want to go to, and it will send you there. You will have roughly about 30 minutes in those groups, and then you'll come back and we'll hear some report outs from there. If for some reason you are not seeing the choice, please just put in the chat that you're not seeing the option, and Raf should be able to help you. So I'm just going to repeat, like if you click on, I think where it says breakout rooms, you should have a little option of that. It will show you the options, and then you would click on either SBO or advocates, and that should allow you to join one of the groups. If you're still having trouble, please just re-put in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to ask for folks still having trouble that are not seeing it. I'll just, if you are still having problems, Raf, are you able to manually send people to breakout groups?
Yeah, just message in the general chat, message which group you'd like to be on, and we can begin to manually assign you. but it is near, the icon should be near the reactions button on the bottom of the Zoom screen. So yeah.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Katie. That's exact, and Cynthia, perfect. That's exactly what we need. Again, for folks still here, if you go to the bottom of the Zoom screen on the far right, you will see leave. Don't click that. To the left, you'll see reactions button. Then to the left of that, you will see breakout rooms. Click that button. You will see two things pop up. SBO, which is small business organizing, and advocates, which is for the advocates and organizers. You can self-select which group you want to go to. If that's not working, please just put in the chat. Please make sure you're named correctly, but please put in the chat which group you'd like to go to.
It looks like we're almost there. We have a list of 14 people left to chat where they want to be assigned to.
And so if you are still trying to figure this out, just place into chat whether you'd like to be in the small group that is discussing small business organizing or in the advocates and organizer group. So either small business or advocates and organizers.
And if Claire, Bill, Jude, Kirk, Jeffrey, Blake, Adrian, Pat, Nathan, Dana, if you could let me know in chat where you wanna go, small business or advocates and organizers.
Dustin, it appears you just joined us. People are in breakout groups right now. One group is for small business leaders, and the other is for advocates and organizers. If you can place either into the chat which group you'd like to join, or you can click on at the bottom of your screen on the Breakout Rooms icon, and you will see those groups, and you can pick one to go to.
Okay, thank you.
Back, everyone. I hope you had good discussions in your breakout groups. I understand that there was a poll that showed up for some in the small business breakout group and not for others. So I think that's going to go up. I ask if you were in the small business breakout group and did not get a chance to complete the poll, it'll just show up on your screen. You pick your responses to it, and then it will automatically send that data to be compiled, but please do that. I am going to ask for either Mary or Sasha to share a little bit about the discussion. Sasha, would you like to begin? You're on my front.
I'll start, sure. Well, I think I was actually really glad to see there was like a mix of folks who are, campaigners and organizers, and also folks who have like local associations of businesses who are also thinking about advocacy and organizing. So it's a really good mix. And we spent most of our time talking about really how to ground the work, how to further the conversation that's already been started, centering the impacts on people of color, and also thinking about, how really thinking about corporations and monopoly power. Carlos from NYCC put this really beautifully as like a big canvas on which all kinds of oppressions in our society are laid out. So when we take on corporate power, we're actually fighting all forms of social oppression. So that was really great to hear. And then we talked a little bit about, the conversation kept coming back to Amazon actually, and how they're unavoidable. And so how do we talk about this? Like, what are the ways in which we break this down, either through, it seems like, on the one hand, educating consumers, people have made some inroads, but really needing more capacity to create social media, and also really thinking about like, how do we move policymakers, because they are not there yet on understanding how widespread Amazon's power is and like what we're up against. So those are some of the things that we pulled out.
Fabulous. Mary, would you like to share some reflections from the small business group?
Yeah, I'm actually going to hand it over to Theo, who facilitated our conversation.
Great. Theo.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, a lot of repeated themes. Our conversation also kept returning to Amazon. One of our attendees talked about repeated experiences of Amazon brushing. Another talked about how we impose on our local municipalities the cost of Amazon's very extensive packaging. And that is a cost that they do not incur themselves, but one that's passed on to consumers if consumers are paying for recycling, and or municipalities when municipalities recycle for them. Another attendee highlighted that they don't often realize how, or people don't often realize how businesses are affected by Amazon, how Amazon threatens them, until these businesses share their stories and share them loudly. And so we talked about the importance of sharing our stories. We also talked about holding local governments and municipalities accountable for being complicit in monopolistic practices. One person commented that the government, it feels like the government gave up on fighting monopolies as long as the consumer saw lower prices. And so we talked about how to fight the mindset of consumers not recognizing the relationship between lower prices and monopolistic practices. And then a few other folks just talked about different examples of monopolistic practices in other industries. So definitely was a repeated theme, Amazon and the role that local governments and local actors can play in pushing for anti-monopoly advocacy.
Great, thank you, Theo. So I just want to reflect back and sort of, again, sort of the theme of the day. I wish that there were not an Amazon, but given that it exists, it has to some degree struck a rock against the amazing assemblage of various voices in our communities that are coming together to take on their power and the power of other monopolies. This is a moment that I think many of us have always wanted to see happen, where we have an alignment between workers, small business owners, other community advocates really fighting for the kinds of communities that we hope and dream about. And I want to, with that, sort of ask, I think there are a couple folks amongst us that have some calls to action about actions that we can be taking coming up in the very near future together. So first I'm gonna ask Ayeli, then go to Jeremy.
Yeah, so I just put a couple things in the chat from the breakout just to surface that real quick, though, because those are definitely actions too. One is an effort working with libraries and Amazon's assault on essentially access to ebooks. And so that's there. And then the other one was they're ending the ring police partnerships. But what we have coming up this week is on Thursday, this June 10th, we're doing a virtual protest, essentially demanding that Amazon permanently divest from surveillance technology, specifically facial recognition, and cut their ties, the same police partnerships with police departments and ICE. And so I can put that in the chat. Oh, Sasha's doing it for me. But yeah, essentially there's 3 actions where you can participate. The first one being there's a quick 2-3 sentence statement. We're asking folks to record yourself reading the statement and submit that to the website. And then we are going to be doing our virtual gallery release on the 10th. Essentially all the videos will be released. We're going to be pushing it into press and also posting on social media. There's also a petition there you can sign. And then there's a feature that allows you to create your own digital poster with your own messages on how you feel about surveillance and calling on Amazon to abolish their surveillance empire. And so that is what we have going on. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ayeli. And I believe I was mistaken that Jeremy is not sharing the next action item, but Sasha is. So Sasha?
Yeah, I just wanted to, build on what Ayeli was saying. So this is Eyes on Amazon Week more broadly, and I was just going to put in the chat the link for the week of action. There's, it's only Tuesday. There's more actions, including the ones that Ayeli mentioned. So people can see more here and sign up for some updates and get involved in this important week, and then hold June 21st and 22nd for Prime Day actions. We'll circle back with folks. We're working on a toolkit for some community-based actions across the country shortly.
And then finally, I'm going to pass to Mary Timmel, who I believe also has another way that we can all get involved and active.
Yeah, thank you all. We ran out of time in our breakout, which was very exciting. So I wanted to throw real quick into the chat that we want to continue working with folks. We want you to join us, sign up for more updates, stay in action. We've been talking to, working on sharing stories and op-eds, letters to the editor, directly to, putting things together for elected officials, events like today. So we want to continue to build on that momentum and to hear from all of you. We know that you have stories and we know that you want to share. So sign up, you'll hear from us. And thank you so much to everyone who came out today. And I will hand it back over to Lauren.
Fabulous. I want to thank you all for coming to this town hall today and sharing all of your thoughts and experiences. And again, I know Senator Klobuchar is not with us, but it was great to have her and her perspective of how what's going on in Capitol Hill connects to what's going on Main Street, Broadway, MLK Boulevard in our communities. And so I do want to point, I'm going to share in the chat a toolkit that is like a corporate power toolkit. It'll also be emailed to you, and there's some resources in there. But we look forward to seeing you all here, and soon to see us all in the streets or in the halls of whatever elected body that we're working to move. Take care, everyone. Thank you.